Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Buckets After Bedtime, the IU basketball pod for busy parents. I'm your host, Dylan, and once the house is quiet and the kids are finally asleep, it's time to talk some Indiana Hoosiers basketball. So as you're cleaning the playroom for the 100th time today, grab those headphones and let's talk some IU hoops. In today's episode, the first weekend of the NCAA tournament is in the books. We're down to 16 teams. I will talk kind of big picture following this first weekend of the tournament. The narrative that the NIL and transfer portal is destroying the March Madness product and that Cinderellas are dead is a common talking point amongst college basketball fans these days. So I go through some numbers that suggest that maybe that's a bit exaggerated. And then I also will talk about what this events over the weekend means for IU basketball, and kind of moving forward and trying to talk ourselves off a ledge, because if I, like many IU basketball fans, come Sunday's results, we're kind of feeling a little bit more down and distraught about the current situation of Indiana basketball. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, I'll preview the Sweet 16, and I will make my updated predictions on who I believe will make the Final Four. As of my earlier bracket, the one I did before the tournament started, I did end up losing one of my Final Four teams, and my national runner-up team is actually in Florida. So I still have 3 out of 4. Overall, I think I went 12 for 16 in the Sweet 16, so not great, but not terrible. But we'll kind of give an updated prediction on what I think is going to happen Thursday through Sunday and who will be heading to Indy for the Final Four. So without further ado, let's get into segment number 1. And that is the talking about the narrative that March Madness is dead. If you were on the internet at all, X, Instagram, Reddit, your favorite teams, message boards, which if you're listening to this, I would more assume likely that you're an Indiana Hoosiers fan. Our message boards, I don't know, were as hot this weekend, just given the fact that we're not playing, but there is a common theme over the weekend, and that is that this March Madness and March Madness as a whole just doesn't hit the same anymore, that the NIL and the transfer portal are killing college basketball, that the idea of a Cinderella is dead, and that it's never coming back, and this is going to be the new norm. And some people, expressing their feelings that this might be the last that they watch March Madness, and that they just don't get as excited for it anymore. And the reason for that is this: the lack of Cinderellas this year and last year. This is the second year in a row now. That's actually the third year in a row now. Pardon me. That there are no double-digit mid-major seeds into the second weekend. This week, this is the second tournament in a row that seeds 13 through 15 went winless. That's only happened 7 times since 1985, and we'll reference 1985 because that's when the tournament expanded to 64 teams. So it's only happened 7 times that 13 through 15 has gone winless, and now it's happened in back-to-back years. So people are pointing that to, a changing of the times, and that NIL and the transfer portal are killing the mid-majors and killing the upsets. As we look at this year's Sweet 16, there are 4 double-digit seeds. There's only 1 double-digit seed. I'm looking at the wrong long line here. Apologize. It's only 1 double-digit seed, and that is 11 seed Texas, University of Texas, is not exactly your poor man's little mid-major. One of the biggest universities on the planet, one of the largest athletic departments in American college sports. So, but is this narrative right? Is NIL and transfer portal killing the Cinderella? is, you look back the first round on Thursday and Friday, there were 4 double-digit seeds that won. We already alluded to Texas, obviously, they made it to Sweet 16, but 10 seed Texas A&M won, 11 seed VCU won, and then 12 seed High Point won. So Texas A&M, obviously big SEC schools, were just, lower seeded, so those aren't really your classic Cinderellas. VCU, 11th seed, they've had tournament success in the past, and they come out of the A10, which A10 really isn't a high major conference, but I wouldn't consider it a mid-major either. It's kind of in that kind of middle ground, low-high major, along with like the Mountain West. So, a team that's, this is a program that's been to a Final Four. Granted, a long time ago with Shaka Smart, but they've had tournament success. But still, they were 11th seed, and they came back from 18-19 down in the second half against a 6-seeded Blue Blood and UNC. So, a Cinderella-esque kind of game where they came storming back, but still not quite a Cinderella-type story. The only one that's really kind of captivating and got people's attention was probably the High Point. They were that classic 12-5 victory. They beat a big-time opponent and a really good Wisconsin team that, a lot of people had as possibly a dark horse to, make a Final Four run with how good their guards are. And it was the way the game transpired too, I think helped. It came down to the wire. You had a High Point, number 99 whiteboard just launching logo threes and hitting them, and then he gets the 2-point basket, his first 2-point made basket all year to win the game. So really only one true kind of Cinderella mid-major esque win this entire tournament. Not to say that there were other opportunities. Siena, 16th seed, was up 11, I think, at halftime against Duke, and second half was in that game all the way till the final few minutes. Kennesaw State against Gonzaga, Wright State against Virginia, all were close games within the final 4 minutes. The other 4 timeout, it could have gone either way with those 3 games. So, if 2 of those go the other way, or if, Siena pulls off the upset, we're not even discussing this. We're talking about how Cinderella's live and well. So I don't think the Cinderella's completely dead. Now, obviously, no 13-3-15's winning for the second year in a row. Doesn't bode well against that argument. The fact that there's only one double-digit seed in the Sweet 16 doesn't bode well. But I looked back since 1985, so that's including this year, that's 42 years of tournament. Again, 85 is when the tournament expanded. There's been 86 total double-digit seeds to advance to the second weekend. So on average, that's about 2.04. So about 2 teams per year that a double-digit seed is playing into the second weekend. Now, if you look at that, a lot of those are, over half of those are high major teams that just had low seeding. So this year's Texas is a perfect example, a double-digit high major school that makes a run to the Sweet 16. Of those 86 that have made a run to at least the Sweet 16 since the expansion, 40 of those would be considered non-high major, so your mid-major schools. And in those countings, I did include Gonzaga, early on Gonzaga, early 2000s, 90s, late 90s, early 2000s Gonzaga. Definitely a mid-major, but they've obviously the past few years have turned themselves into a major program, but I still included them in those early years. They had a few when they were double-digit seeds advanced to the second weekend. So, but regardless, 40 of those 86 were mid-major schools, so that's about 0.95 average per year, so just under 1 a year, roughly. Since 1985. If you look at the past 5 seasons, so since 2022, the average double-digit seeds, is about the same, about 2.1, so actually a little bit more. And the average mid-major is about 1.02. So again, not a huge. I mean, these are bigger numbers than if you take out, the entirety. If you take a microscopic look at the last 5 years, the numbers are right on par. And why did I do 2002? Well, that's the year that July of 2021 is when NIL came into fruition in the transfer portal. So that was the first season of full in college basketball, full transfer portal and NIL. So although it seems like people want to tell you that NIL and transfer portal are completely killing the mid-majors and the Cinderellas, so far the numbers suggest that they're on pace for what they usually do. Since 2022, going back to the 2022 season, they had 4 double-digit seeds advanced to the second weekend: Miami, Ohio State, Michigan, and St. Peter's. So again, only one of those teams is a true mid-major in St. Peter's. In 23, one team did, that was Princeton. Princeton team that beat their 15 seed, beat Arizona, and I can't remember who they beat in the second round. In 24, that was the NC State run. They made it all the way to the Final Four. 25 last year was Arkansas. They were a 10 seed, I believe. Or were they 8, 9? No, I think they were a 10. And then this year's Texas. So, again, I think we think that Cinderellas are dead because the past couple of years, we haven't had any big upsets. I think last year's biggest upset was Oakland beating Kentucky. This year's High Point beating Wisconsin, and we haven't had multiple of those in a season in a while, it seems like. But at the same time, I feel like we think it happens all the time, where in reality we just remember the big upsets just because they're so memorable. You remember St. Pete's going on that run. You remember UMBC and FDU beating the 1 seeds. You remember George Mason going on a Final Four run. You remember VCO going on a Final Four run. You remember those, Davidson with Seth Curry making those runs. And so I think just because they're so memorable, we think it happens a lot more than it actually does. So, were we seeing less big upsets? Yes. Do I still think we're start seeing more chalk than that? Possibly. But I think the big takeaway though too is, we still only have five seasons of data points since NIL came into fruition. So even though the numbers right now support that maybe they're on par to what it has been, with maybe a little bit of a drop in the total mid-majors, double-digit Cinderellas per se, winning multiple games in the tournament. It's still pretty early. You still only have 5 years. Yeah, I have more years and more data points before you can really draw to a 100% conclusion. So, I don't think we can pronounce Cinderella's dead. I don't even think you can say Cinderella's on life support. They're being closely monitored right now. But I don't think they'll be completely dead. To be honest with you, I still think this is college athletics. Crazy things happen. I think with NIL, the transfer portal, what's actually, I think, showing is that we'll have more variety going into the second weekend. I mean, yeah, we don't have any true Cinderellas. High Point wasn't able to pull off a win against Arkansas to get themselves into the second weekend. But you have a Sweet 16 that includes Iowa versus Nebraska. Iowa hasn't been in a Sweet 16 since 1999. Nebraska's never won a game going into the tournament prior to this year. So even though they're high major programs, not exactly the most well-known basketball success. St. John's too, even though, yes, they have Richard Pitino, legendary Hall of Fame coach, the St. John program as a whole hasn't been very good. This is their first Sweet 16 since 1999 as well. So you're getting these teams that traditionally aren't your basketball powerhouses able to make runs in the second weekend. And I think NIL and the transfer portal kind of can help those types of programs out if they do things intelligently. Obviously, Iowas and Nebraskas don't have as big of budgets as your Kentuckys, your Dukes, etc. I know St. John's, they have a pretty wealthy booster that definitely has helped them take over and be able to adapt to the transfer portal world. But I think it's more of a matter, just like anything else, having a good coach and spending wisely, and you'll find success. So I just think the lack of upsets per se, I don't think that's gonna go. I don't think it's gonna be completely dead at the end of the day. At least I hope not, because that is one thing that makes the March Madness so intriguing, exciting. But I would say more so than anything else is the entertainment value of it is just the possibilities of that happening, of watching a game in the last 4 minutes and it being, David versus Goliath being close. And obviously that's something that I would monitor more than the actual number of upsets themselves. If you have more duds of games with larger winning margins, that's going to make for a less entertaining product. And there were quite a number of games that were 20-point plus victories on margins. And I think that hurts more than lack of upsets. Because I think the perfect mix is you have 1 or 2 major upsets, but then you have close games across the board, but then the best teams are moving on, because then in the later rounds you get the best matchups. And then better brands of basketball, because eventually the time does run out on Cinderella, and it usually ends in a pretty significant blowout later in the rounds, because they just run out of steam. So I still enjoy March Madness overall, and so I'm gonna keep watching. And I don't think March Madness is dead, or it's gonna be the product isn't as good. So, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, let's move on to our segment number 3. So what did the results of this weekend mean for IU? Watching the Florida-Iowa game on Sunday night, I found myself rooting for Florida, not because I had them in my bracket, and despite the fact that Florida might have the most unlikable coach in the game in Tom Golden, and they're the defending champs, so you kind of want to see them falter. Unless you're a fan of that team, obviously, because I knew exactly what was going to happen if Florida didn't win. And the second that the clock hit 0, the IU chat boards, the Twitter Xverse was going crazy with the sentiment that Indiana made the wrong hire. We hired the wrong Drake guy. Ben McCollum's so much better than Darren DeVries. We missed out on Dusty May. Now we missed out on McCollum. We're doomed forever. This program's cooked. And honestly, at first, I felt the same way. I was thinking, once again, this administration, the athletic department has made a poor hire. You see Ben McCollum, a guy who was mentioned through the process of the IU hire. So this isn't like a pipe dream. This isn't the Brad Stevens talk, or, the Billy Donovan talk, or whatever you want to say. This is a guy who realistically could have been hired at Indiana in his first year. Same conference, same region. Takes the team to the tournament for one, and then he gets them to the second weekend in the process of defeating the national defending champions, a team that has way more talent, way more size, way more athleticism than his team does, but he just puts his guys in position to win. And here they are with a chance to a realistic chance to at least make the Elite Eight and possibly make it to the Final Four in year one. Now, in the initial process, my thoughts on McCollum were he had one of two paths was going to happen. That one, Iowa was going to become the next Wisconsin, which, if you kind of look back at Bo Ryan's trajectory is very similar to Ben McCollum's, a guy who had a lot of success at the D2 level, didn't have a ton of D1 experience before taking the Wisconsin job, and then all of a sudden built Wisconsin to what they are today, a consistent winner, a team that is often in the top half of the Big Ten, a team that's often competing for Big Ten championships, and a team that's, getting good season in the tournament. And every once in a while, get yourself a team that you can realistically, see yourself making a run to the Final Four, and then who knows what happens there. Or that the second option for McCollum was, 6 or 7 years down the line, Iowa's going to be no better off they were now than they were when they had Fran McCaffrey. And then they fire him and off they go. Right now, the arrow seems to be pointing up and towards the latter of those two situations. And then you combat that with the fact that Darren DeVries in year one can't even make the tournament. And you get these declarations that Indiana made the wrong hire. Ben McCollum is going to be this great coach, lead this great program, and Darren DeVries is going to be gone in a couple of years. Again, though, it's only year one. Like I mentioned earlier about the Cinderellas and March Madness not being as exciting with as many upsets and all that, we just don't have enough data points to support Ben McCollum, career trajectory being better than Darren DeVries. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it's not off to a great start, and it's hard because as fans, we live in the now, and seeing two first-year head coaches. And one doing so much better than the other. And it's not just McCollum, but you also have Odom at Virginia. They got a 3 seed, won a game. Sean Miller at Texas is in the Sweet 16. John Lucas at Miami won a game in the NCAA tournament. But with McCollum, especially because it's, again, same conference, a guy who was, if you believed some of the rumors around it, was on the list for Indiana. Now, how true that is, and was he even interested in Indiana? Was Indiana really interested in him? Would he have even accepted the job if Indiana offered it to him? Because, in McCollum's eyes, he's from Iowa, a chance to coach at his state school. And to be honest, in this situation, that's not as, not as much as a pressure cooker as Indiana. So, you never know. It's all hypothetical if you even would have taken the job. Same conversation we can have with Dusty May. People say, we mishandled Mike Woodson. We should have fired him a year sooner. We would have been able to get Dusty May, and we would have been where Michigan's at now. That's not necessarily, theoretically sure, but also it could have been a situation where Dusty May's not interested in the Indiana job, even though he was a Indiana manager. He's from the state. Like, maybe he doesn't want to, mix church and state and go to the school where he started and where kind of the area he's from. Maybe he wants to get away from that and make his own name for himself somewhere else. So you just never know if, anytime with these coaching hires, you just never know if what's true, what's not true, if they would have taken the job or not. So, but that's besides the fact, though. Overall, I think it's the bottom line. It's hard to jump to conclusions just yet. But what this does do, though, seeing the success of McCollum, seeing the success of Miller at Texas and Miami's John Lucas and Dusty May year 2 at Michigan, and even Pat Kelsey to an extent, and Mark Pope to an extent at Kentucky, even though Mark Pope's kind of under the hot seat, but that's because Kentucky fans are one of the probably most craziest, rabidest fan bases in the country. But, teams who, coaches in year 1s and year 2s who are getting to the tournament, winning multiple games in the tournament, it puts more pressure It really turns the heat up on Darren DeVries and his coaching staff for this upcoming year, because you didn't get off to that start. You didn't get that general foundation of making the tournament. So it's really going to turn up the heat quickly on them, and they need to really, be very smart and make a splash in the transfer portal. And by splash, I don't mean get the top names, but that's necessarily spend the most money. It's, again, talked about earlier, using your resources, which you have more of compared to the Iowas of the world, and getting the right pieces and getting the players that fit your system that can succeed in the Big Ten and beyond. So we'll see if he can do that. But the results of this weekend just put more pressure on that situation for them, which is, that's part of the job. So we'll see if they can respond to it or not. All right, let's wrap things up with the second weekend preview here. So we'll go region by region. We'll start in the East. The East has the most intriguing coaches of all the regions. You have Duke and John Schneider, Izzo with Michigan State, earlier UConn, and then Pitino with St. John. Duke seems to be the most vulnerable of the number one seeds remaining. And then you have Michigan State and UConn, which is going to be an absolute battle. Might be the most physical matchup outside Tennessee and Iowa State over the weekend. You have the potential for a round 4 between St. John and UConn for a chance to get to the Final Four. You have Izzo could make another Final Four again. Duke trying to make it to back-to-back Final Fours and avenge a terrible meltdown in last year's Final Four. So a lot of intriguing storylines, and a situation where any one of those 4 teams I could see coming out of it. I predict that St. John's going to beat Duke, and that UConn will beat Michigan State. My initial pick prior to the start of the tournament was Michigan State, but after watching Michigan State turn the ball over all day against Louisville, they're not going to be able to do that against UConn. Or if they are able to get past UConn and do that, they won't be able to do it against St. John or Duke. So give me UConn coming out of the East. In the South, you have the Corn Bowl. Yeah, Iowa and Nebraska for a chance to go to the Elite Eight, which might be the most interesting game, just because of the stakes of the game itself and the rivalry between the 2 schools. Houston, Illinois, though, is going to be an absolutely great game. 2 teams playing very well, and whoever wins that will definitely be the favorite in the Elite Eight game. All these games will also be played in Houston, so you add the ravenous fan base of Nebraska and Iowa and Illinois, and then it's being played in Houston. I think the South's going to have the best atmosphere of all the sites. But give me Houston. I think they take care of business against Illinois, and then Nebraska, Iowa is such a coin flip, but give me Iowa. I think Iowa pulls it off, and then Houston over Iowa. Out west, Arizona seems to be the favorite, but they get theirs Acuff and Arkansas, so that's no easy task there. And if they get past that, they're most likely seeing Purdue, who a lot of people in the Purdue camp seem to feel like they're destined to make it all the way this year. Well, but they can't overlook Texas, because Texas does have some NBA talent, and we know how sometimes Purdue can struggle against larger athletic teams, even if they don't have as much basketball skill as them, and are built as well as they are. Sometimes the athleticism can make up for it, and plus Texas is playing pretty well right now, going from the first 4, trying to get the first 4 Final Four like VCU did back in the day. But I think Arizona's gonna take care of Arkansas. I think Purdue does take care of Texas. Arizona, Purdue 1 versus 2, and I think Arizona advances out of the West, which is what I originally predicted to start the tournament. And then finally in the Midwest, we have Michigan, Iowa State, the 1 and 2 there. They look really good. Iowa State, obviously, big question mark is if Jefferson's going to be able to be available. It'd be a huge blow if he's not. But Michigan, they've got Bama, who's shooting lights out right now, and if that continues for Bama, it's gonna be tough for Michigan. I could see Alabama not only beating Michigan, but then beating either Iowa State or Tennessee if they're shooting the ball like they are. And then obviously Tennessee too. You could see them putting the clamps down, especially if Iowa State is missing Jefferson, and that could kind of stagnate the offense. But Tennessee, Iowa State's gonna be an absolute bruiser. I think Iowa State will prevail in that one. Give me Michigan. I think Bama's just too volatile. And then Michigan, Iowa State. I think this is where, if Jefferson's playing, I think it's gonna be a really close game. It could be one of the best Elite Eight games out there. If he's not playing, I think it's gonna be too much for them to overcome. But in any case, give me Michigan to advance to Indy. So that gets me UConn, Houston, Arizona, Michigan. So 2 2s and 2 1s in Indianapolis. But that will do it for tonight's episode of Buckets After Bedtime. If you found this enjoyable, please share it with your family and friends. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We are available on Spotify and finally on Apple Podcast. Finally got that figured out. As well as other major streaming platforms. We're currently also on YouTube at Buckets After Bedtime. So you can catch our podcast there. We're also have our Twitter page, Buckets After Bedtime. You can follow us at the handle at Buckets Bedtime to keep up with some of our daily stuff. But thank you again for listening. Appreciate everybody who has tuned in, and please tell your other college basketball loving friends and your IU friends about us. We appreciate you. But until next time, hug your kids, get some sleep, and as always, go Hoosiers.